Good evening, all. We are in the final session of the day. Towards the end of the session, feedback link will be given. And I wholeheartedly welcome all to the Comprehensive Strategy and Inferential Reading session by retired Professor Dr. T. Sasisekaran. He has been teaching English language and literature at collegiate and university levels for the past 45 years. He is a teacher, trainer, research guide, material producer, textbook writer, linguist, and an ELT expert. He is also an accredited examiner for Cambridge examinations. His PhD is in the area of applied linguistics. His highly commented thesis was on language policy and planning in India with particular reference to the state of Tamil Nadu, and he is considered as an expert in the domain of language planning. Post-retirement, currently he is involved in the areas like soft skill development and placement-oriented training, textbook writing, and material production. Sir, we welcome you, sir, and on to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. In the first place, I would like to congratulate my colleagues in the ELTAI for having organized this very useful program. And I would like to thank all the frontliners of ELTAI, particularly General Secretary Professor Ilango, for having asked me to join for this presentation. Now, today's presentation, I am going to talk mostly about a particular area of reading, because I think we need to narrow down things to smallest units so that clarity will be better and our ability to deliver things in the classroom also will be better, rather than talk about reading as a kind of broad monolithic process, which has so many things to it. So I'll be narrowing down my talk to the kind of reading activities that are required for placement these days, particularly in professional colleges, engineering colleges, as well as arts colleges. What are the kind of reading comprehension questions are asked in these verbal aptitude tests that are conducted by visiting organizations and companies, particularly from the IT industry? So that will be the core part of my presentation. Before that, let me talk something in general about reading itself. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that of all the language use skills, reading has always been a very marginal kind of skill, an exclusive kind of skill, which means starting from the classical times to modern times till universal education became common. Reading was something that is known only to a very small percentage of the people. In post-independent India, the literacy levels, as you all know, were only around 10%, which means that in the late 50s, around 1950, people who could read in India was less than 10%. Be it their own mother tongue or English. Of course, English was very exclusive. Those who were associated with the British Raj, those who were working for the British, and those who knew the English language only could read. So it is very common in the rural areas of India to approach people to read something. Anything that is in the written or graphics form needed to be read by someone else. This was the reality. From that kind of a situation, you must remember that in about 70 to 75 years, we have traversed a long way, a long distance we have traveled. And thanks to universal education, a vast majority of people are able to read today. They are literate. Even then, again, If you check the literacy levels in India, even today, you will be surprised that there are quite a percentage of the population which cannot read or write. So this is the situation. So let's not think that reading is something that is universal, that has been there all the time. It's not like that. It's only for the past 75 years that the number of people who can read things, both in the mother tongue as well as in the second language, has increased considerably. And then again, as practicing teachers, we know that there are quite a number of problems that learners and students have when it comes to reading. So we'll talk about that later. So that takes us to this business of people always saying that the reading habit has gone down. It's common to hear these days. People lament. They say that reading habit has gone down terribly. And every generation has the habit of saying, in our times, that we used to read a lot. So this is something that I would like the English language teachers to consider very seriously and see if that is true. Possibly we must start with accepting the idea that the concept of reading and the practice of reading as we understand it, the very concept has changed. That's very important. Everything has changed. The way we dress, the things that we eat, our lifestyle, our work culture, almost everything has changed. It's not what it used to be 30 years back or 40 years back. So against that general backdrop, it is not surprising that reading has also the habit of reading, the concept of reading, the idea of reading, the practice of reading, all these things put together, they have undergone a tremendous change. What could be the reason for this? What does this change signify? The change signifies that today there is a vast amount to read from. A very vast amount of available things to read from. The corpus has enormously increased. 30 years back, what you could read was limited to printed books. If you needed to read something, you needed to take a printed book or a magazine or a periodical, as I call it, to read, or the newspaper. So the printing medium was the main operational area for reading. Without that, you couldn't read. Now today, look at the scenario, how it has changed. The spread of technology, the availability of gadgets, amazing gadgets, and the spread of the visual media. It's a visual media that is ruling the roost now. So all these have redefined the concept of reading. It's not the same anymore. There is so much that you can read from. If you want to read a printed book, it's available. If you want to read the novels of P.G. Wodehouse, or for that matter, want to read the novels of Charles Dickens, you can read it in the digital format. So when the availability is so much, it redefines, it redrafts the very the contours of our reading habits, our reading practices. Now, let me tell you narrate one interesting story here. It may be appropriate to mention that in one of the novels of Isaac Asimov, I try to recall that name of the title. I'm not able to recall it exactly. Sorry, but it is from Isaac Asimov. Most of you would have possibly had the chance of reading that. There is this story about a futuristic story about a brother and his younger sister, a young boy and his younger sister in the year 2050. Both of them go to the attic of the house and they rummage through the things that are there. And while they are doing it, they come across an old printed book. Printed book, it's in the sense a book that we use these days. So the young girl asks her brother, "What is this?" The brother tells the sister, "This is called a book." You check it on Google, possibly you will get to read this part of Asimov story. The brother tells her, "This is 2050 and another 30 years from now." The brother tells that this is what they used to read. Boys and girls, young children, adults, everybody used to read things from this kind of a thing called the book, he says. Very amusing story, in fact, but not far away from reality. It's already happening. It's already changing. So what does this signify? That story tells us that in 2050, there are learning stations. The colleges and universities and schools as we know them, the institutional structures as we know them, they all have disappeared. And the young children, they learn sitting at home in what is known as the learning station. You go sit inside the learning station, which is a small workstation like. You have everything available there. Any subject, any topic. You have lectures, you have visual presentations, you have explanations. That is how they read. Is this fantasy? Is it something that we are not able to imagine? I think it's very much in the possibility, in the realm of possibility. Imagine taking online classes itself. A couple of years back, possibly that something that is a very rare thing to happen. But today, we are getting so used to using online interaction everywhere and for everything. So this process of change, it's going to impact the habits and preferences of reading in a tremendous way further. The third point is that so everything has changed. So the concept of reading, the idea of reading also is changing. That's the point. The second point is that reading is today a question of preference based on needs, requirements. What people read, there are two things: what they read and how they read. Let us look at what they read. So what they read is purely decided on their preferences. And before that, let me talk about this change a little more so that you will be able to enjoy how this process is being relooked or relooked at and redefined. Naipaul talks about his new idea of literature. And one of his very discursive novels, he says that cinema will be the new literature of the 21st century. I don't know how many of you can accept that, because we are stuck, or we are caught in a kind of a thought frame where literature to us is only in the graphic form, in the written form, and the printed form. So most of us may not be in a position to accept this idea of Naipaul that cinema is emerging as the new literature of the 21st century. Anyway, that's a point that can be debated. But if you look at the aesthetics and the artistic content of modern cinema, its ability and its reach, possibly you will be able to understand that it can reach places where conventional literature cannot reach, and present things more effectively and more powerfully. So this is the change that we are talking about, from the print medium primarily to the visual and the multimedia mediums and the digital age and its choices. So look at the choices that you have in the digital world. So much so, we are talking about digital intelligence. This is a concept most of you teachers may be familiar with. If you're not, please check it. You need to check on 21st century skills. There is a template which tells us what are the important skills that are required for the 21st century life, way of living and working, particularly the professional world. And there, one of the things, apart from other skills, that are mentioned is this business of digital intelligence. That's your ability to choose what you want from this vast spectrum of digital content that's available at your disposal. So this digital intelligence is supposed to be very, very necessary for any successful individual. And this digital intelligence and what we choose to read, what we require, again, will decide what we read. So that should draw the curtains on our complaining all the time that the reading habit has come down. A kind of valediction for weeping, I call it, in the metaphysical sense. So how do we understand? Let's move on to decide on what reading we are talking about. We are primarily discussing in another 35 minutes the pedagogic process that is involved in the teaching of reading to the tertiary learners. That may include the secondary learners also. Can apply to primary and secondary education also, because the basic guidelines are the same. Now, what our students read is based on their needs. Language use is decided by needs. Speaking and listening by default are universal. We listen to anything and everything. We speak anything and everything. According, even these two again are decided by the context, as everything else is. But reading being an exclusive practice, it is purely decided on the needs that we have. And today, in this busy world, people read only what they want. There may be a small percentage of people who read that bit extra, but generally speaking, the average individual, be it a man or a woman or a young man or a woman, they read only what they need to read or they are required to read. What we call extra reading is something a matter of choice. How many of you have the habit of reading fiction these days? How many of us, rather? Not many. I don't think most of us have the time for that. Even that has gone down. So we primarily read what is needed, what is important, what is required, what is prioritized, what is foreground. The rest of the things, of course, we may want to read, but that can always wait, because either there's no time or there's no space in our busy time schedule. For example, again, to bring in Nepal, if you want to read a novel like The Enigma of Arrival, try and read it. College teachers, I would request you to try your hand at it, at reading V.S. Naipaul's Enigma of Arrival. And that will really throw up a challenge in terms of reading, even for us. I recommend that you read it. So it all boils down to our needs, then the purpose, which again is related to our needs. Read for pleasure, or for general information, specific information, and specialized information. There's a difference between these two. At times we need some specific information. At times we need specialist information that is related to our domain of knowledge or domain of work. Say, for example, a college teacher looking for very refined nuances of English grammar and syntax would be looking for to read at something that constitutes a specialist kind of information. Specific information is required at that particular moment. A patient may want to know what is a gout. He may want to know what is arthritis. So the digital platform, the digital avenue provides you the scope to read what you require, either for general information or specific information. And reading for pleasure, it's no longer reading, it is visual content. Remember that the visual medium has always played an important role in the history of humanity. Starting from ancient times, starting from the earlier plays, dramas. In India, you had folk forms of theater. So was it in the case of West. So the visual medium has always appealed to people. That's why the popularity of TV and TV and cinema are so very high and so very powerful these days. So when it comes to reading, pleasure, reading has been replaced by the visual medium. Now, I don't see anybody reading for pleasure. Not, I can't generalize that way. Most people, at least, I don't see them reading for pleasure. If they want entertainment, you want to spend the time happily, I think they go to Netflix or Prime Videos or any of the other things that offers them video. But do people read for pleasure? Of course, there are people who read for pleasure, but that I guess that percentage is at a low. I would say, at least that's what I believe in. Then you have heard voices and unheard voices, we call it. People have this urge to be heard. It's a universal quality. We want to be heard. We want our voices to be heard. Till recently, at least till the arrival of WhatsApp and Facebook, this possibility of our being heard was very, very limited. Nobody was there to listen to your voice unless, like in olden times when we were young men, the only way your voice can be heard was to write a letter to the editor of the newspaper, which the chances of it getting published was very minimal. But today, look at it. How many people express their views on the social media? How many people at least forward? They keep forwarding and moving things. Quite a number of people have become writers. Now, the average, coming to the purpose of our presentation, the average reading, the average person's reading mostly relates to messages on the WhatsApp, messages on Facebook postings, and things like that. Social media reading has become very, very important. Now, again, the purpose, function, what are the functions that prompt us to read what we have? Professional requirements are there, something related to our work. We always want to find out something about our work and something that's related to our work. The primary reading done by youngsters, the youth today, is academic reading. Beyond that, I don't see them, most of them reading anything. Maybe there are exceptional cases. There are certain, about 10% of the students who read extra. Then voices, I call these voices, that's social media. Voices relates to social media, pleasure and entertainment, and general knowledge. Again, general knowledge is something that is a very nebulous kind of area now, because we don't know. General knowledge itself has several strands, and those who are specializing in competitive examinations, they may read something that specifically relates to this particular domain or to this area. So this is how it goes. So let us understand that there's a sweeping change that is taking place everywhere, has taken control of this process of reading, this business of reading. So we cannot generalize things and say that the reading habit has come down very badly. People don't read these days. That kind of generalizations have to be made very carefully in the present situation. So reading is based on needs. Reading is based on requirements. It's based on the purpose and the function for which people choose to read. And reading has generally been replaced by the visual medium that is there. And the printed word, the graphic substance, is being replaced by the visual substance. That is the reality of the day. So what do we do? This is at the macro level. What I have been speaking so far relates to the macro aspects of reading. Now let's move on to the micro aspects or specific aspects of reading. ELTAI has devised this program or designed this program to encourage effective reading strategies among learners in colleges and schools. So what do we need to do to encourage better ways of reading, more productive ways of reading, more effective ways of reading in schools and in colleges? So that's what I'm going to talk about. Again, there are quite a number of things. It's a broader area. Reading, I always prefer to focus on subcategories and particular specific categories, because it helps us to understand things better. Instead of saying reading in general, I would today prefer to talk about the reading activities that are being prioritized, that are being taught in professional engineering colleges for the purpose of students taking the verbal aptitude tests that companies like top IT companies like Cognizant or Infosys, or for that matter, SAP or any of the other companies, they conduct. You may be surprised to know that these companies give reading comprehension activities, which sounds a little puzzling, but they do give. Let me talk about it in a while, in detail. So for the learners in the classroom, in the reading classroom, what are the things that are difficult? What are the strategies that we have to adopt as teachers in the reading classroom? How do you teach reading? Can you devise specific plans, specific strategies to help students acquire better abilities at reading? This is what I am going to talk about, particularly when it comes to finding a job. What are the things that they need to keep? What are the kind of reading comprehension texts that these verbal aptitude tests normally use? That will be the last part of my presentation. So strategies that we adopt in the reading classroom, if there is a reading classroom, or at least part of our classroom activities are devoted to reading, or should be devoted to reading, keeping in mind the skill-based approaches that we are adopting these days, the CLT framework, a communicative language teaching framework, which we are beginning to increasingly adapt. It is proving to be effective, and quite a number of institutions are adapting the CLT framework. A lot of activities being used in the English language classroom, and we cannot anymore excuse ourselves with the usual explanations that there are no facilities available. It is very difficult to conduct activities in the classroom. It creates problems, it creates noise, and these kind of things. There are quite a number of institutions have effectively adopted the communicative language teaching methodologies in the classroom. And a considerable portion of these teaching practices are devoted to the business of reading, learning to read better. Now, Indian learners, they have this particular problem, or what is rooted in bilingual challenges, I call them. The reading, it has to switch between reading in the mother tongue and reading in the other tongue, or the second language. There is a difference between reading in the mother tongue and reading in a second language like English. This bilingual switching, it always creates problems, throws problems. When it comes to English, there are problems that are non-linguistic, like reticence. You have problems like reticence. You have problems of failing to understand how to go about this business of reading, quite a number of things. So these are some of the things that we have to keep in mind. Of course, we are not going to solve all these at one stroke or at one go, not possible. There are quite a number of things that we can at least try and experiment in the class to help students to learn better. So what are the things that you can do? Number one, may look and sound a little old-fashioned, but this is being now increasingly used in the communicative language classroom. I repeat, we are talking about a communicative language teaching framework and a communicative language teaching situation. where the focus is on learning language, learning the English language, and honing the four skills of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. If we are still in a conventional, conservative mode of teaching prose, poetry, grammar, and things like that, in a different setup, that then again, there again, you have to do some rethink. Of course, I don't see any big difference there. There's always this dichotomy. People talk about this dichotomy of teaching language through literature and communicative language teaching. People say these are two different things. It's not like that. When you teach literature, the focus is on the literary aspects of the language. And the same literature, the same literary text can be used in a communicative language teaching classroom as well. The daffodils can be used, can be taught in a literature classroom. The same poem, Daffodils, can be used in a communicative language teaching program. Don't ask me how, but that needs a separate presentation. I don't think that I'll have the time or the scope today to explain that. What I'm trying to say is that there's no division really. Whatever be the text that you want to use, grammar can be used in both the situations, in a conventional grammar classroom as well as in the communicative language teaching framework. Only the focus shifts. When you teach grammar in a communicative language framework, the focus shift, the method changes. You focus more on the functional and usage aspects of grammar. You teach usage first and then come to the rule. Whereas in a conventional grammar classroom, you teach the rule first and then drill them in usage. So these are things that have been changing according to the changes that have taken place in the field of theoretical linguistics and ELT theory, which I'm sure that you people are familiar with. At least the basics of ELT theory, English language teachers should be conversant with. So where do we start? In a classroom, where if you have about 30 minutes earmarked for reading, how do you start and where do you start? Like I said, I found this particular activity very, very useful. This is called reading aloud or vocalization. Let's use the expression reading aloud. This we have been doing in some of the institutions. At least I've been trying it when I was presiding over the preparation of the curriculum and the syllabus and classroom practices. It proved to be very, very effective, believe me. So what is this reading aloud about? In a class of 60, in each class, you make at least 10 students read a given text aloud. Vary the text. You prepare a collection of text, a choice of text, short text, maybe about one paragraph, half a page. Make them read these things aloud in front of others or in groups. Can use it as a group activity also. So what happens is when they read aloud, it is not the point. It is not that you need to sit and listen quietly and award some kind of grading. That's not the purpose of reading aloud. Reading aloud, it becomes both a reading as well as a speaking activity. When they read aloud, you can correct them in terms of pronunciation, in terms of intonation, in terms of where to pause and where to start, in terms of meaning units, meaning clusters, in terms of vocabulary. Quite a number of students do not know how to read properly. Let us accept that fact. Because reading has always remained a silent incognito activity, which means the students read to themselves, by themselves. So you don't know how they read. Do they read them correctly? Do they pronounce words correctly? Is there intonation? Intonation is related to reading? Yes, it is. It is related when you're reading aloud. You know where to or how to modulate. So when you learn all these, your reading becomes effective. And who can correct it? The teacher. I still hear a lot of students at collegiate level, in professional colleges, in arts and science colleges, pronouncing a lot of words the wrong way. And this is a wonderful activity where you can correct their pronunciation, the way they read. So when they learn to read well, This practice could be very, very helpful for them. Then when they do it on their own, when they read, they would have learned how to read properly. So this activity, like I said, may look a bit old-fashioned, is very, very effective, which I have found out from my previous experience. So try it. Don't give very long passages. Keep the passages short. Make it a group activity. Let them read. Let them read once, twice. The same text, when they read the second time, there will be considerable improvement. If they achieve that improvement, then you would have put them on the right track from where they can do things on their own. So this is one important activity that I can think of. Then reading speed is important. Initially, we should make them aware of reading speed. They should learn to practice reading faster. Of course, initially they can read at their own pace. Some of them read very slowly. Some of them try to read too fast without understanding of what they're reading. So the correct reading speed, the correct way of timing it and practicing it. Can reading speed be improved? Yes, it can be improved. We have studies to show that reading speed can be improved. Are we going to spend days and days together on this? Not necessarily. Just have a couple of activities where you teach them that reading speed is something that can be improved in a meaningful way, where they can read more and they can understand more. Definitely they will find it very, very useful. That is the second thing. The first thing is reading aloud activities. The second one is reading speed activity. They say the ideal speed is 150 words per minute. That you check on that. You can Google for ideal reading speed. Maybe there could be variations, not necessary at all levels. It should be uniform. For the beginners, the first year graduate courses on school level, it can be a little less. You can work on that. You can check on that and find out. Things can be timed today. The teacher can time it, see how many words they read in a minute, and things can be done. You can't time it for a minute. You'll have to time it for 3 minutes or 4 minutes, make them read, and then see how many words they have done. And for this particular activity, a Word document can be used. Any text that is used for the speed testing, reading speed testing activity, you need to use a Word document, because a Word document tells you how many words are there. You don't have to sit and count. You can take a text that is about 500 words long or 700 words long and make them read and see how much time it takes, so that they will learn slowly to improve that reading speed. Then you need to make them, third point is that you need to make them aware of the textual types when it comes to reading comprehension. Because understand that reading comprehension, as we call it, or reading activities are part of all the major competitive examinations, be it the common admission test CAT conducted by the IAMs, or any of the other examinations where there is a language component. Definitely there will be a reading comprehension activity. If you're talking about international language certification programs like IELTS conducted by Cambridge University, you will see that there is a reading section in that examination. Business English certification at the Cambridge University, you have reading. You look at the reading comprehension, reading activities, the reading passages of the common admission test conducted by IIM, you will find that they are one of the finest examples of reading activity. So let's not think that reading activity is something that's done in schools and that's a mechanical routine exam activity. It's not like that. It plays a very important role. Now, like I was telling, do companies use reading comprehension activities in the placement verbal aptitude tests? Yes, they do. Only with a slight difference. I'll show you some examples. What kind of reading activities are used in placement related activities? Why do they use reading comprehension? Why should an aspiring IT professional should be good at reading comprehension? Why do they give those kind of exercises or activities? The purpose is that reading is an important aspect of business English. When these guys are recruited and they're taken to the companies where they have to work, reading becomes an important part of their everyday work experience. Reading emails properly, understanding them fast, responding to emails, reading reports and understanding them and responding and acting accordingly, preparing reports for team meetings and business meetings, writing to customers, business letters, and things like that. So, in all these, reading and writing, listening, speaking, all these play an important role. So, reading is considered to be an important part of business English transactions. So, that's why companies give a reading comprehension activity. But these are different. Let me show you in a while, in a short while from now. I'll show you what kind of reading activities are given by companies, recruiting companies and recruiting agencies. It's not like the usual reading comprehension activities that you have. So that is one thing. You need to make them aware of the different textual types, whether it is a narrative text. You don't have to spend too much time on this. Just give some small examples, short examples, and tell them what's a narrative text like, what is a descriptive text, what's an expository text. An expository text is something that explains things in a factual way. You have literary texts, you have academic texts, texts that students mostly learn, which are predictable, they are well defined. You don't get any surprises there. Whereas in other things, the content and the context may totally be different, something new. But in academic reading, it's mostly predetermined, pre-defined, and predictable. So they can expect what is there to be expected. So you must explain. Then social media, news, digital content, the digital discourse, the digital text, social media text. The social media language, as you all know, is undergoing tremendous transition. Do languages change? Yes, they change. English is not the same language that it was 500 years back, or 300 years back, or 200 years back. Is Tamil changing? Yes, it is changing. Is Hindi changing? Yes, it is changing. All languages will change. This is inevitable. Let us not cry over it. Let us not be purists and say that the standards have to be maintained. We don't talk about standards and the pure variety in a post-structural and post-colonial world. All varieties are accepted. All varieties have to be taken into account. The Cambridge University and the Cambridge dictionary is based on the spoken corpus as well. There was a time when only the written English was considered to be the pure form of English. But today, you know that Cambridge University uses a wide corpus of spoken English specimens for its collation of the dictionary words. So that variety. So all these different things that you can teach students. In 1 hour, you can talk about these things. If you prepare well, you can explain all these things to the students. The textual types, narratives, descriptives, expository, argumentative or point of view texts, texts which talk about 2 points of views, opposed points of views, academic texts, literary texts, and digital texts which play a very important role. In shorts, news items can be used in the classroom. It comes in about 60 words. You will find that it is the most condensed and the most beautiful way a news item can be written, and that can be used as a very good example of reading and writing activities. Now, what kind of skills do these learners acquire to do better reading? What are the skills that are required? So basically, they need to understand a text, a reading text, in terms of its global significance and its local content. These things I think you are familiar with. When you do a reading comprehension activity, if you understand the overall content and overall meaning of the passage, of the text, that's called global understanding. In short, if you are able to answer the question, what is this text about? If you can say that in one sentence or two sentences, that means that you have understood the overall meaning, composition of the given text. Local understanding or local comprehension, global comprehension, and local comprehension. Of course, you must have heard about this during the course of this FDP. You're going to hear about a lot about these things. Local comprehension deals with the details. It's like the forest and the trees. Global comprehension is like the forest, having a whole wholesome view, a whole overall overview of the whole thing. That's global understanding, global comprehension. Local comprehension is looking at the details, looking for specifics, looking for the defining supporting points. That's called local understanding. So this is the basic skill that students need to require. What are the topic sentences in each paragraph? Identifying the topic sentence could be a very important aspect of global understanding. If you identify the topic sentences, then you would have understood the centrality of meaning in the given text. So this is something that is that you have to start with. This is the first skill that you have to impart, tell them about, talk to them about, give a few one or two couple of activities, ask them to find the topic sentences, ask them to find the important points, main points and supporting points. If you want to reduce it to simple terms and reach to the students, you can say identify the main points and the supporting points. You can ask them to make notes. You can ask them to do a mind mapping. This mind mapping is a very useful activity. Mind mapping strategy. If you want to know more about mind mapping, Google for mind mapping. You will get the thousands and thousands of examples of mind mapping. How mind mapping is done to capture the essential feature, the essential important aspects of a given text. Mind mapping could help students understand things very easily. The second skill is associative comprehension skills. That is the ability to associate, compare things and contrast. Of course, this comes with practice. They must be able to compare things. What are this side? What are the points, plus points? What are the minus points? Positive, negatives, affirmatives, negatives. What are the plus points and minus points? So, what are the different viewpoints that are given in a text? That ability to associate. Then, of course, at the higher level, you have evaluative or critical comprehension. Inferential comprehension, that's what we are going to do today. So these correlate in the following way. I mean, finding global and local points, that's called the basic comprehension. Then associative comprehension is comparing ideas. Inferential comprehension is logical reasoning. You have to use your logical reasoning and find out what is the subtext, what are the ideas that are hidden between lines literally, what are the things that I need to infer from this text, what is the superficial meaning, what is the conveyed meaning, inferred meaning that could be drawn from the text. Because meaning is always, it goes up in spirals. If you deconstructing meaning itself is perhaps the most important aspect of learning as well as living. So what are the tools that we can use? Like I said, mind mapping is a very fantastic tool. Mind mapping helps you to capture the essential points in any given text in no time. Note making, proper note making strategies. These two strategies, if you teach them, they will understand exceptionally well. Then at the higher level, you have to decide where you're going to bring in all these things. You can't teach all these things at all levels. Then you have to talk about coherence and cohesion in a given text. How ideas are strung together to make meaning comprehensive and complete. So cohesion, coherence. Coherence is basically, it relates to the semantic aspects, the meaning aspects, the ideas. Cohesion relates to the structural aspects, how sentences are linked, how paragraphs are linked, how cohesive devices are used in a text to fuse together the structure of the text in a very fine, meaningful way. These are higher level analytical aspects of reading. But this I'm telling you because you need to know all these things so that you can use your discretion and do these things in the classroom where they are needed. Don't start with the coherence and cohesion and higher aspects. Then another important aspect of vocabulary, reading, is vocabulary. Do not underestimate the role of vocabulary. Vocabulary is one of the most important aspects. Focusing on vocabulary, different aspects of vocabulary, word forms, word choices, connotations, collocations, fixed expressions, and things like that. These are all very, very useful things that you do in a classroom, depending on, again, on the level you're teaching at and the requirements of the students. You can make a difference between content word, meaning words, and grammar words, or the functors, functional words. These kind of things make a lot of difference in a reading classroom. So all these things I hope that you will use in your classrooms. So let's move on to the last part of my presentation. I think I have about another 10 minutes. Yes. Yes. So let's move on to
Sir,
the. Can you show me the? Yes. Can you show me the Word document? Can you
Word documents.
unfurl?
Yes, sir.
Yes. How many minutes do I have?
Sir, we are about to move to the Q&A session, sir.
Pardon?
Move to Q&A session, sir.
Okay. Okay. Show that word.
Yes, sir. Word
Yeah.
document. Yes, sir.
So what I'm going to show you in this Word document is the kind of reading comprehension text that companies use in the placement round. Like I said, this is the specific area that I would like you to think about, because this is very useful for the students, those who are facing placement. So you have different types of texts that are used in the placement round. This is one type. I am not going to read or make you answer, but you can. This is the standard thing. But you will understand that the passage is not very long, medium length, and the questions that are given are very, very analytical. That is the difference. In a verbal aptitude test conducted by companies, these comprehension texts become very analytical. They require a higher order thinking and evaluatory and logical reasoning skills to arrive at the answers. I'll show you the next two, which are important. This is more like the conventional type of comprehension passage. I can ask them to share this Word document with you. Not a big problem. Let's move on to the next one. Look at that. This is actually a reading comprehension that was given by one of the companies. I don't want to name the company. In a recruitment drive. Look at the size of the text, the length of the text. Just read it fast. 24 lines. Looks very simple, but if you look at the questions again, it throws up some challenges where you need to understand things properly. You have to use our logical reasoning and an analytical skills here to arrive at the answers, because the direct answers are not possible here. You have to infer the answers, or you have to interpret the text in such a way that you get the answers to these questions. Right? Look at this length of the reading passage. It's only about 3.5 lines, but the questions are so beautifully framed that it really makes it a bit challenging for the learners. This is one model. The next model is what I would like to talk about. Let's skip this. This is again, this you can, yeah. This is the last part of my presentation. This is called the inferential comprehension. You have to infer the meaning of the given text and answer the questions through inference, through analytical evaluative strategies, and through using logical reasoning. Now you have two texts like this. I will ask them to forward it to you. Maybe you can have a look at this particular text. Again, the text itself is only about 4.5 lines of length. There are 5 statements that are given there. These 5 statements have to be rated on the scale that is given there, A, B, C, D, E. A refers to definitely true. If the given statement is definitely true, like number 5, the environment around plays an important role in on health status. It is definitely true, then you'll have to mark it as A. The second one, if the inference is probably true, it's probably true, but it's not directly mentioned in the text, then you mark it as B. Then if you think the data is inadequate, like T2, statement number 2, the public transport system is in the hands of private sector. This is something that is neither directly mentioned in the text nor denied by the text. Maybe there is an indirect reference or inference that you can make. So in such cases, you say safely, you say data inadequate. Then you have the other extreme side of the other side of this scale. If you think the statement is probably false, not definitely false, you rate it as D. Then if you think that it is definitely false, the statement is totally against what the text says, then you mark it as E. This is one important kind of comprehension passage that companies give. There is another model there. This, look at this. It has only 3 lines. The text is only 3 lines. Though the state cultivates only about 3.2 lakh tons of mangoes, goes on like that, and 5 statements are given. You have to say whether it is, again, you have to refer to the scale and say whether it is definitely true or probably true, or the data is inadequate. If you can't draw any direct inferences from the text, then you say data is inadequate. You can't answer whether it is true or false, so you say data is inadequate. Then you have probably false and definitely false. So these are the kind of things. So focus on these kind of new comprehension strategies. Remember the things that I told you that you can use in a reading during a reading session in your classroom activity. And I hope that you'll be in a position to teach the learners how to read better. That should be our ultimate aim. Instead of complaining that they don't read, they waste their time on mobile phones, or they waste their time on social media, let us focus on the positive. That's the purpose of this FDP. So I hope that you will use at least some of the things that I have mentioned. I hope that you found the session useful, and you can reach out to me if you want, if you have any particular clarifications related to my presentation. You can reach out, get my email from the organizers, and try to send me a mail. I'll definitely respond. So let me thank once again the organizers of ELTAI for whatever they're doing. It's a wonderful effort. And let me say a big thank you to all the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So we have a question here. So Dr. S.B. Fatima Mary, she would like to know, how do we make reading easy for a non-English medium students?
Yeah, that I think is a question that is right on top of all our minds. I think it all basically relates to the choice of the text. So you have to make an assessment of the level of the learner or groups of learners, and choose the reading text very carefully according to their level, according to their understanding, where the complexity of the sentence structure should be relatively simple. The choice of vocabulary should be at an average level, which would be easy for them to understand. Then please make them read aloud. Give the text, make them read aloud. When they read aloud, try to correct whether it is inflectional aspects of the word forms, like the verbs and things like that, and guide them. Make them read properly, proper pronunciation, proper way of intoning things, the ways, the tone, and all these things, without explaining all those theoretical aspects. In effect, read and show them how it should be read, and they will become better readers in course of time. You have to guide. So the level of the text is important as far as that particular question. That's a good question. That's an important question that is being asked by most of the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the remarkable and informative presentation, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.